Chapter 5, Dyatlov's Pass. I'm honestly not enjoying this. Major McCurdy led her small nuclear specialist platoon up the pass. Rather, she followed behind them, directing them where to walk. Even though it was summer, the weather couldn't be trusted to remain warm. They each had a large bag which had their hazmat gear, the suit with its oxygen tanks and tubes, as they were going into a potentially dangerously radiation-infested environment, and every precaution had to be made. McCurdy knew it wasn't natural radiation up here, but even Marna was poisonous to the normie. McCurdy looked down the mountain pass, glancing at the dirt and gravel, crumbs of the mountain rolling down the hill until inevitably coming to a halt when the kinetic energy lost all movement, just like the radioactive readings this team picked up in the facility. She let out a deep sigh as her ears trained on the four of those with her, listening in on them while they took a break, discussing the fabled incidents of the Dyatlov's Pass, infamously called Devil's Pass. Such a fitting name for such a dismal place. She wished she could have come here by herself. It would save her from the guilt, save her from the grief of killing these men or getting them killed. But an officer just simply going off base while on duty was suspect, and she needed a believable ruse. And these men fit the bill perfectly. Just how many more people close to her would she have to kill before she became utterly numb to the grief and guilt? How soon until her heart became one large callous? McCurdy walked over to them as they finished their conversation. Looking down at them from a ledge, she said, "Lee, get the micro-R meter and start measuring. Break's over." "Yes, ma'am." He got into his pack and pulled out a brown box with knobs and a little white screen with readings and a moving needle. He measured the radioactivity with the device on the terrain. "Not far to go now," she said to them. "We're to the final destination." "Is there some kind of bunker up here?" Gongora asked. "No." McCurdy turned her gaze to him. "Idiot." "Major, the readings are picking up again," Lee said. "It's very minimal, 0.83 sieverts." "Not terrible," Nguyen said. "However, we still need to be cautious. Let's hope it stays that low." "Pop on your hazmat," McCurdy ordered. They slipped in through the yellow material. Some were clumsy, but McCurdy put these on thousands of times, and so did Lee by the looks of it. He was already helping Gongora put on the clumsy black gloves. The face shield fogged up their vision, with the breath inside and nowhere to exhale from except through the air filter. They put these suits on in a matter of 10 minutes, including the oxygen tank. McCurdy noticed immediately that Adams was fumbling his oxygen tank and getting the tank attached to the hose. She shook her head as she breathed heavily, walking over to him. Her face's visor fogged up with each breath as she slowly made her way over to him and grasped the hose, attaching it to the oxygen tank for him. "I never liked these things anyway. They're stupid and unnecessarily complex," she commented. "Of course, I would think that. Unlike you, I don't need it." Her vision was fogged by her breath. "Everyone ready?" "Yes, Mom," Lee commented, pulling up his now empty pack to the side of his pocket. His breath began to fog up the inside of his visor. His rifle was at his side. "The sieverts read higher up. Lead on." Lee led them onward, climbing and following the radiation levels as the sieverts grew higher on the meter. They climbed up, taking steady breaths along the way. Lee climbed up another ledge which looked like it could be the top of Dyatlov's Pass, but the pass shrunk back down into a basin. Around the edges of the basin was a rock labyrinth, leading to a wheel-locked door. It was steel and embedded into the mountain like a trapdoor. Lee looked down at his meter, and the radiation stopped reading. He hit the meter a few times. The meter still didn't read any radiation. McCurdy observed the specialist, Lee, taking his meter to the side. She couldn't make out his facial expression with his fogged visor, but she knew his file. No one knew these old meters better than he did. Not in any of her other units, certainly. He knew what he was doing. Lee flipped the micro-R meter upside down and unscrewed the back, and took out the battery, and replaced it with a new one, screwing it back together for an updated reading. This is when she knew something was wrong with the machine. Those meters can only handle so much. "What happened?" McCurdy asked, wondering why he stopped. Her eyes scanned the basin, looking for runes scraped on the sides, or mana circles from previous casters, or mana residues, anything to clue her in on the possibility of an enemy here, but so far found nothing. "Radiation killed the battery," he replied. He turned the meter back on. "Much better. Only 0.043 sieverts. It's less than before. Gongora, I think I found your bunker." He turned to McCurdy. "Is this place showing up anywhere on the map, or even in something classified?" "No," McCurdy answered. "There's nothing to indicate there was something like this here. Be careful, that radiation can spike back up any minute. Do we know why this is happening? Adams asked. That is precisely why we are here, Nguyen said. We need to climb down. Keep your eyes peeled. Odds are I don't think we're alone, McCurdy stated. Check your fire. I needn't remind you Ukraine officials could be up here. Then why didn't we call for backup then? We're not infantry, Adams exclaimed. Don't you get it? Gongora said. We aren't even supposed to be here. This was a last-minute mission. Likely didn't get approved by the higher-ups. We're here now, and that's that. What do you mean, higher-ups? She's right here. We're not going to find out bickering. Lee started climbing down, and the rest of them followed. She shook her head in her suit. You got too comfortable for insubordination. She kept her thoughts to herself, not wanting to clue them in on the real reason they were there. She didn't need them to know she was sending them to their graves, but she was most of all disappointed. This army wasn't the army she once knew, filled with discipline and respect. The unit underneath her was undisciplined, unchecked, and disrespectful. Such men do not belong in the military. Perhaps this is for the best. McCurdy looked to the rocks to her left, and she squinted her eyes as she noticed a glowing circle embedded in the rocks. Numerous shapes and designs lay within it. She recognized the ancient language, the ancient runes only a caster would know. To these soldiers, should they see it, it would only serve their superstitions. Another caster is here. Who are you? They continued to climb down carefully to get into the basin of the pass. A rip or tear in their hazmat suit meant inevitable death, and they all knew it. McCurdy was the least disturbed by that fact. They observed the basin, carefully monitoring for extra radioactive activity around the basin. McCurdy observed with her hands crossed behind her back, subtly pulling mana out from the rock into her mana veins, hiding inside her hazmat suit. Your orders, Major? Adams said. Radioactive activity has depleted. Affirmative, Lee replied. He turned to the door to the unmarked bunker. Do we need to go in there? Yes. Lee, I want you up front. Gongora and Nguyen behind him. Adams, you're with me, she said. Lee, get that door open. Yes, ma'am, he stated, walking over to the iron-cast door and placed his meter softly on the ground. With his hazmat-covered hands, he turned the wheel, unlocking the rusty mechanisms behind the door. He slowly pulled the creaking door on its hinges. Dust came out and clouded his face shield. He wiped the dust from his suit. He picked his meter up as everyone turned on their flashlights. The entrance into the bunker was dark and musty, and felt desolate as if it had been abandoned for decades. They entered in, observing the radiation levels, which appeared to have settled down. The clicks of the meters only activated every few seconds, flipping the needle back and forth. They looked to either side of them to see various tables and other rooms with doors that were forced open, dented, and twisted beyond repair. What happened here? Gongora asked, shaking his head as he looked at the carnage. The rooms were completely in disarray. There was coagulated blood on the ground, the gel shimmering crimson on the walls with their flashlights. Some of the blood was smeared like the entrails of a man with his torso ripped open and dragged off further into the dark. Silence! McCurdy sternly called. This is just an illusion. I can tell, damn caster, whoever you are. This was recent. Shut up and keep moving. Someone is still here. It was heard among comrades sharing the same hellish living conditions. Nguyen was laser-focused. His almond-shaped eyes narrowed as he peered into the darkness as they walked forth, scanning the room with every step they took. This reminded McCurdy of a horror movie, entrails dragging themselves down the hall, the iron doors rusting, and each step she took creaked. She felt unnerved as her fingers in her suit began to tremble, feeling this unnatural place, void of all life, but she knew something more. Sieverts did not just start and dissipate naturally. There was a caster here, or perhaps a Threckit. She hissed silently at the thought, not keen on fighting one of those down here in close quarters, whatever form the Threckit chose to take. She knew this was a false sense of security. The meters didn't pick up anything new and stopped making their gurgling sounds altogether. The darkness became cold and oppressive the deeper they had ventured into these godforsaken halls, until they came to an end of it all. They came to a room, no, an altar. Blood smeared all over the place, and many shapes and circles were carved with human blood over the walls. There was no reactor, no working generator, nor was there any viable source of uranium or plutonium anywhere. No radioactive materials. Lee grimaced as he looked on the altar. He put his meter on the cold metal floor. He turned to McCurdy, and he wasn't smiling. Major, you have some explaining to do. Do you know something we don't? No, she lied. Her heart started to race. I can't kill a Threcket in the middle of a mutiny. Damn it, Lee. And don't question me. She stared him down with cold eyes from behind her visor. Her heart started to race, the stakes rising. No, I think this is a valid reason for questioning. We've all been here. The radioactive activity died as soon as we came here, and there is no evidence that there was any radioactivity here, minus the readings. Do you know something we don't? He pointed a finger directly at her. What's your mindless speculations, warrant officer? I don't have time for this, McCurdy snapped at him. And no, I don't. McCurdy could tell Lee was scowling behind that fogged mask, rising with a sense of distrust for her, and the distrust will soon spread to the rest of them. You're right to distrust me. I would. Major, we are soldiers, not exorcists, Adams interjected. We need a priest for this, or backup. We don't know what is down here. Something is unnatural about this place, and we don't know what we're getting ourselves into. These readings are sporadic enough as it is without us being here. That is precisely why we are here, Specialist, she said. We don't know, and we need to know. You all came to the worst place, said a voice in the corner. All 5 of them swiftly turned around to see a man holding a pile of red schlop in his hand, pumping like a heart, but this was no heart, at least not any heart that McCurdy had seen. He bore a sinister smile upon his face, a man filled with bloodlust that would never be satisfied. The man held himself in high esteem, as if looking down on all of them. McCurdy could feel the condescension. His pants were ripped in parts, and he had many cuts all over them, as if he himself just fought off a Threcket. The man was bare-chested, with rippling muscles, and blood dripped down several cuts on his face and chest. "Only Dan," he chanted. "Only Dan, only Dan, only Dan." A red light emitted from the schlop. The soldiers panicked, drawing their sidearms and pointed it at the man. They all aimed down their sights, ready to fire. The light lit up the room, and they found themselves in a room filled with nothing but bones beneath their feet. They glanced below. Bones, human bones, flesh and blood covered their feet. "What the hell is this shit?" Lee cried out. He stamped his feet on the ground, crushing bones beneath him. "Who are you?" McCurdy asked. "What are you doing here?" "I think that not be the question you should be asking, Major," the man said, throwing the beating schlop of mass directly at her. She moved to the side swiftly, letting the mass strike the wall behind her. "And what question might that be?" she asked. "Orders, orders," Nguyen cried out, his pistol trembling in his hand. "Major, what are your damn orders?" "Orders, Major? What are they, Major?" The man mimicked Nguyen. He sighed as he moved his bloody hand's palm to the side. "I guess it matters not. Secrets, that is all they are. Secrets." "What are you talking about?" She ignored Nguyen's cries for an order. Orders were orders, but right now this was not the time for her to wear her military hat, but as a caster of the administration. "Why are you here?" "I was looking for the Grail. It appears it is not here, and I don't think it holy. After all, wasn't it the key to Pandora's box?" "I didn't think anyone would tell anyone where the Grail is," she inquired. "And don't speak of the Grail. That is on a need-to-know basis, and no one here, yourself included, needs to know." "Major, what is he talking about?" Gongora interjected. "That is need to know. You don't need to know," she snapped. "You, the casters of the administration, aren't very smart, are you?" the man asked. "It doesn't matter. You are out of time." McCurdy heard a frightened gasp from Lee. She glanced over to see his fogged mask. She imagined his eyes were stretched as wide open as his skull would allow, assuming such a worrisome response from a warrant officer only meant one thing. The radiation maxed out the micro-R-meter. 5,000! Adams exclaimed. "That is not an accurate reading," Lee shouted. "Our meters only go up that high. It's much higher than that. We need to get the hell out of here or we'll be fried to a crisp or on our deathbeds with cancer next week." "No," said McCurdy. "It's fine." "Have you lost your damn mind?" Gongora explained. "This is not what we signed up for. We are not getting fried because of whatever the real reason is why we're here. We aren't infantry. We aren't trained to handle something like this." "Look," she pointed. A gate of fire and ice opened behind the man. He passed through it, and both the gate and he was gone. McCurdy could feel, even with her suit, the temperature dropping in the air, and the hair stood on ends on her back, as she was certain everyone with her felt the same. Only she knew their hearts were much closer to beating out of their chests. She was certain they were left unaware of these ancient arcane elements kept hidden to them for the last 1,500 years. Just here, they were made aware of everything. Magic, casters, portals, illusions, and least of all the Grail, whatever this person was truly after. These were all things that, according to the caster's code, must not enter the minds of normies, lest the threads of creation come undone. That is what she was told, anyway. The micro-R-meters measured back down to 0 immediately. None of them needed to be here for this. I hate this code. She let out a sigh. McCurdy's eyes narrowed behind her mask, the mana still being pulled through the oxygen in the air and through her suit. She backed away from the group of her specialists, who still trembled as they pointed their guns at the precise location from where the portal vanished. She could hear their sporadic breathing over the comms. They were terrified, and why shouldn't they be? No matter how disciplined they were, which they weren't, everything they thought they understood about the world came undone, just like their sanity, as it became unravelled. They could hear the rapid bubbling from behind them. McCurdy's eyes angled. It's one of those Threckits. She now knew what the beating schlop was, just a little vessel for the Threckit to form from this world. Whose heart did you take? Shit, she swore under her breath. They all turned around to see a large bubbling red mass forming from the wall. It slowly began to take shape. McCurdy had a better idea of what she was looking at, but even to her, the bull's head protruding from the clicking segments of a centipedal body made her ill. The disgusting creature stood tall on strong horse legs. Many arms bearing stingers were already flailing towards them. She let out a sigh of relief. Well, I don't have to kill them now. What the actual hell is that? Lee raised his rifle, aiming down the sights to the Threckit, pulling the trigger. To hell with your orders, damn it! Gongora and Nguyen marched to the side, their rifles flaring. The bullets sparked as they struck the Threckit. No surprise there, those hides were damn near impenetrable and needed specific things to pierce it. Weapons of the modern era were completely useless. The beast roared and smashed into Lee, digging its stingers into him. He cried out in agony as the stingers began to inject him with poison. Blood and poison immediately saturated his body. Gongora and Nguyen immediately opened fire. The bullets penetrated the Threckit, and the holes in the creature produced purple pus that filled the air. McCurdy walked backwards, leaning against the back wall, waiting patiently for the creature to kill them. After all, she felt that if she personally killed them, it would shatter her spirit. I'm sorry. The creature immediately flung itself into the direction of the gunfire. Nguyen dove to the ground, shooting at it from below. Juices oozed out of the Threckit's wounds, raining on him from above, eating through his suit like acid. The beast impaled Gongora with its venomous stingers and ripped him in several pieces, his limbs twirling in the air, spraying his blood in all directions, splattering on McCurdy's visor. She imagined the kind of pain Nguyen should be feeling right now, but he didn't show it, never made it known, even in a yelp. He started running out of the hallway, only to be impaled from behind by the deadly stingers, and likewise ripped apart. He didn't even have time to let out a final cry for help. Well, now that's over with, McCurdy said. It is time to send you back. She pulled the mana from the air into her mana veins. She pulled out her knife. Her blue mana veins crawled from her glove and onto the knife. The beast sprinted at her. Immediately she swiftly cut into the air, shapes of circular runes into a circle, leaving her mana's residue there, cutting into the threads of creation like flesh. Deoful Spreot, she chanted. Deoful Spreot. She pulled the mana from the air. Wind picked up the dirt in the room, striking her suit. She felt the air cooling around her and heard the miscellaneous debris of office supplies strike her visor. The mana swirled around her, crafting a red flame and red spears fashioned from the mana in the air. The creature finally barreled into her, but she did not move as her blue veins turned grey, forcing her in place like an immovable statue. The red spear penetrated the beast, pouring its blood on the floor. It screeched in agony as it crumpled on the ground. The mana she pulled in the air protected her feet from being burned from the acidic blood. Deorfald, she chanted again, as she drew another shape in the air. This shape was more square and less elegant than the shape before. Black chains grew up from the ground. They encapsulated the beast, pinning it to the stony floor. The beast writhed against the chains. In a puff of ash, it disappeared. All that appeared left were the chains that collapsed noiselessly to the ground. She breathed in the mana from the dead that rested here, Nguyen, Lee, Gongora, their husks bubbling and burning away until nothing was left except the iron ground. There was no evidence that they were here. They just simply vanished. She shook her head, swearing underneath her breath, as she hastily took off the hazmat suit. Her veins turned blue again as she bolted out of the room with her flashlight and the mana spear in her hands. She sprinted through corridors and exited the bunker. Adams was on a rock outside. His helmet rested next to him. Clearly he was no longer disturbed by the radiation, or, to call it what it was, concentrated mana. Something invisible that caused a slow, albeit painful death must have paled in comparison to what he'd seen in the cave, to what McCurdy wished killed him. Adams looked up to her and jolted up, backing away from her. "Major, what the hell was that?" "You have no right to question me when you left us to die like that," she said, holding the spear in her hand. His eyes were fixed upon the spear, something he didn't see McCurdy come up with. "Nothing about today made any sense. A bunker with high radioactivity, with no source to cause said activity, a portal or some shit, and I don't know what to call that, some bubbling goo, and not to mention this illusion or what." Adams breathed heavily, his eyes glancing past McCurdy, presumably towards the hatch into the mountain. He lost sight of the spear until he found it in his chest. The blade cut through his chest easily. She ripped it right back out of him, spraying blood over the basin of the pass. He coughed blood and placed his hand on his chest while he stepped backwards, tripping over the rock behind him. "Major, what are you doing?" I'm sorry, kid," she stuttered as a tear dripped from her eye. "Shit, I missed the heart. You see, normies like you, no, accidents like you aren't supposed to see caster nonsense. It would destroy the very fabric of your beliefs. Trust me, ultimately, it's for the best. I didn't plan on you being a little chicken shit and running away. Now I have to kill you, something I was trying to avoid." Adam's eyes stretched open as he reached for his sidearm. McCurdy swiftly swung the spear. The force of the elongated red blade slicing through his wrist, through the disembodied hand with his sidearm through the air. He cried as he turned around and sprinted, his heart racing, beating through his chest like a heavy metal drum solo. He made it to the path where they came from and tried to climb it, but his stub of a hand was beyond useless. She walked around to him and pushed him away from the path. As he tripped on the ground and crawled away from her, McCurdy stared at him with teary eyes. "Honestly, I'm not enjoying this either, for the record. Honestly, this is the part about my existence I hate the most." She felt her heart sinking, and the spear trembled in her hand. "You are all family to me, brothers and sisters in arms." She firmly grasped the spear in her hand, returning her resolve to do what must be done, despite the singular accepted fact she didn't want to kill him, but she had no choice. She thrust the spear into his chest, not missing his heart this time. She twisted the spear, tearing his flesh and heart apart. She looked into his eyes as the life left them. Sighing, she took a step back, dropped the spear to the ground. When it hit the ground, it dematerialized in the air, creating little red lights as it faded into nothingness, floating in the air like reverse snowfall. She leaned against the wall leading upwards. Her mana veins thickened on her skin, pulling the refreshing mana from the air, the clunky mana from the stone, and the thick mana from the blood. Adam's corpse boiled, fading away all parts of him as McCurdy converted his body to mana entirely, drinking it through her veins. His body faded into nothing. She cried into the sky as the guilt constricted her heart as if a sadistic snake slithered its way through her ribs and wrapped around her heart and lungs, suffocating the air and blood out of it. She didn't want to kill him, or get them all killed, but that was the nature of this cursed administration. There has to be a better way, but everything's already been tried. The administration is so cruel. Why does it have to be this way? Why can't these normies know? We would have to kill so much less, she thought. She remembered something important. Her job here was not done, even though the site was now confirmed secure. She had to radio in the administrator. She pulled out her phone and planted her veins into the phone, preventing any unwanted listeners. "Admin Colton," the voice said on the other line. "Major McCurdy. Status report." There was another caster involved. It wasn't anything nuclear on the pass. Someone was using it for experimentation and summoned a Threckit here. "The caster was looking for the Holy Grail," she replied. "The man seemed to know much. He is skilled enough to open a portal from Pandora, and enough about necromancy and demonic magic to bring Threckits into this world." "Appearance?" "White. Accent was southern United States, maybe Georgia. Dark hair, 5'11", 180 pounds. Muscular. Estimated. No name was given." But he spoke as if he was not a caster himself and held disdain for the administration, and he seemed to know I was a caster before I did anything. "Go dark. You are being transferred to London immediately," he said. "Don't worry, you'll have more information on your email in a few hours. Get on the next plane to London. Don't worry about your replacement." "What's my mission?" "We can't trust the head administration anymore. Odds are whoever that is was a rogue and a mole sent to spy on us. That is the only logical conclusion, and he may have had a goal in mind that wasn't the Grail, and that was just an excuse to throw you off. You're going to retrieve the Grail from them, diplomatically, covert, choice is yours. We can't leave it in their hands anymore, not when they're so corrupt as it is." "I understand. If it is the will of the USA branch of the administration, I will see it done. See that you don't disappoint. Colton out."